Hi, and welcome back to Unlocking Venture Capital, where we talk about everything related to venture capital and startup. My name is Sydney Wong, and I'm so happy that you're joining us here today. So, today I wanted to talk to you about a story that I don't tell very often. It's about turning down $4 million in funding when I was a founder. So what happened was that when I was running my startup VenturX, which is a KPI tool for early stage startups, usually in the SaaS-based industry, and it is monitoring certain kinds of KPIs at the very early stage. So what happened was that, I was networking a lot, meeting a lot of people, and there were a lot of different kinds of incubators and accelerators and investors in Canada that may have a little bit of unorthodox kind of structure and tradition and ways of operating. And there are some characters that actually I think none of them actually exist today anymore. So this story is something that I don't think any other founder could even copy right now, nor could they copy really any of my footprints that I've done to get to where I am today. So yeah, as a founder, I built a really great network in the startup and investor space, and I was offered this kind of funding for my company, and I turned it down. And every single day, I do wonder if that was the right thing to do or not. And I think that at the end of your life, you never really know. You never really know, because how could you know? How could you know when one thing will lead you to one path and another thing will lead you to another path, right? What you can do is just make the decisions based on the information that you have. Are these the people that I want to work with, or are these the people I want to work for? And what is the difference of how it would be like to work with them? What is it like to continue on with your own team and continue on with building on something that you really believe in? So there are some characters in your life that are meant to come into your story at certain points temporarily. And then there's some characters in your life that are supposed to come into your story and stay there for a big part of your journey. And I truly felt that at the time they were not the right characters to come into my story at this particular time. They didn't really have the same vision for what I was trying to build, and they really liked me, and I don't know in what capacity they wanted to buy parts of the company and in what capacity they wanted to be associated with me for certain kinds of reasons, and I was not sure. And that was kind of a lesson that one of my mentors was trying to explain to me over and over again, was that when you're building out your network and you're starting out in an industry that is as dynamic and fast-paced as the startup and investment industry, you always have to be thinking and be careful about who you're associating with and why they want to be associated in your network and in your relationships and all of these things. What are they trying to get out of it? And what is it that is mutually beneficial for everybody? And kind of how that big picture kind of looks like. He was always really good at challenging entrepreneurs to see the big picture in things. And I can do that now, but when I was a founder, it was really, really hard. I was really just laser focused on what my North Star metrics were, on what my KPIs were, and what my goals were for what I was trying to build and for my team that I was working with and wanting to benefit them as well. So that's kind of why I turned this down. The startup industry is really small, right? So if you know a lot of people, whether it's in your country or whether it's in a certain stage that you're at or whether it's just in your industry and things like that, you'll always be able to hear what people say about you. So there were some things that were said about my startup that, the people who wanted to invest in my company had certain kind of motivations about. And so my friends and colleagues then told me about it, and it gave me a different perspective on what kind of investors they were. So that's kind of what I meant by, okay, are these individuals people you really want to work with, and why not, right? What are they really buying when they're trying to buy out parts of your company? And what do they understand about your industry? And how is it that they're really going to help you build out what the vision is supposed to be or what the vision could be? Are they going to be there as smart money or dumb money? So all of this kind of comes into play. And I think that what a lot of first-time founders don't see is that you can say no to things that are not right for you. But you can also ask for things like down rounds. You can also ask for things like, okay, these are the conditions that I want. You can ask for a lot more than I think that founders give themselves credit for, because it was always put up as kind of an unfair playing field. And when I said no, and when I kind of, drifted away a little bit from these opportunities, I think that they were just really surprised because they didn't have anybody who said no before. And eventually, those kinds of structured funds and reverse accelerators and those kinds of things eventually disappeared. And what didn't disappear is me. I am still here, and I got to learn a lot from these kinds of experiences. A friend of mine, she just did a venture capital course. She wants to go into venture capital. She's right now in consulting. And she asked me an interesting question recently. So she watched me do a whole analysis and feedback session with a startup. And she was really happy to kind of be a fly on the wall for that kind of session. And I really enjoyed it too. So she asked me, what kind of next steps or studies or things that I can practice or learn to learn about being in venture capital. And so it's things like turning down $4 million, and it's things like being in tech debt, and it's things like, these really character testing moments are the things that really teach me the most about what kind of investor that I'm going to be, because it's based on a lot of vast experiences. So where I came from in my journey, I don't know how I would ever put it in a bottle or a package or a textbook and be able to just give it to someone. I have no idea how to do that. So I told her that, and it was a very dissatisfying answer. It would be dissatisfying to me as well, to be fair. So I said, well, this is really just based on my years of experience. I don't know how I would know these things, There are reasons that I know so many different kinds of business models, so many different kinds of accelerators, incubators, those kinds of things. I would know the kinds of questions to ask when I see red flags or yellow flags. But these are things that I don't know how somebody would possibly teach in a course. I don't know how to give somebody a founder experience or founder empathy. I don't know how to give somebody, a vast amount of different models and valuation testing, these kinds of things to really put to the test. I don't know how to give somebody that. When investors say that something comes from a gut feeling, it really does come from experience. I don't know that anybody is born with gut feelings when it comes to a certain kind of startup or deal or investment or any of it. I don't really know. It's not. How do you have a gut feeling about a pitch deck? You don't. You read through it and then you kind of see, all right, well, this is something that I've seen before. This is not something that I've seen before. How do they present their case? What does the competitive moat look like? What does the market look like? How are they going through their thought process when it comes to their go-to-market strategy? But all of these things that I'm mentioning, they're all regarding experiences rather than black and white answers that you can really test out in a textbook. And I wish that you could. I wish that people didn't have to go through that kind of pain that I went through as a founder. And a lot of it too, I was, one of my favorite things that I've done in my career was an entrepreneur in residence. So I did that several times. My first time was with Spring Activator, so an impact fund and accelerator out in Vancouver, BC. And my mentee was asking me, she is a solo founder and she is fantastic. She was like, okay, well, I'm thinking of hiring out for business development and I need to have this list of leads. This is the kind of industry that I'm in and everything. And I go, okay, great. So you shouldn't be paying more than like 6 cents a lead. And she goes, how did you know that? How would you know that? Like, how do you, and she's writing down all of these things, but instinct is telling me this because this is something that I've researched before. It's a similar industry to something that I have researched before. And not all of your leads are going to convert, right? You're going to have a certain amount of leads that go into conversion or leads that even go into a next call. And you can't really guarantee any of that it's going to be successful. So, the way that they are scraping the internet or scraping whichever kind of database or platform in order to find leads for you it shouldn't be more than about 6 cents. You can pay more, of course. It does depend on your industry and everything. But if you're paying in the dollars for these kinds of very, very cold leads, then, that's kind of another red flag for an investor. And the only reason, like I said, that I know that is based on experiences, is based on your pain. It's based on how many millions that you have actually let go of or turned down or any of these things. So these are the kinds of things that I take with me a lot. And I also just don't really talk about it a lot. I don't think a lot of investors do talk about where their experiences come from in a detailed, deep, emotional, personal sense. I don't really know why that is. I think that one of my reasons is that not a lot of people really ask me in this kind of a sense. I'm doing this this video because my co-collaborator has asked me to talk about it. So here I am sharing about, what really went through, how I felt, and, I don't have any hard feelings with the people that I didn't take any money from. I don't think they have any hard feelings about the equity that they were trying to gain either. I think that it's that there's lots of different opportunities and startups out there. There always will be. It's really just the best fit for you, and it's not always going to be so black and white by nature. Another interesting example is just to kind of go through which kinds of experiences you have when it comes to fundraising, right? So the way that there are some investors who ask you certain kinds of questions, like the same way that they asked me, and I wasn't really fundraising at that time either, is not really just to get a direct answer from you. Of course, they would want direct answers, but just kind of see your thought process and how you've approached it, right? So because I wasn't fundraising at that time, I answered things in probably a very naive way. Like, they're like, what other investors are you talking to? I'm like, well, none of them, because I wasn't fundraising. And so when they're asking me these kinds of general fundraising questions, they got very kind of much more surprising answers because, like I said, it wasn't the goal at that particular time. My goal was to get feedback for my product, reiterate, and come up with a new version as quickly as possible, and keep going with what the demand is trying to tell me, and keep going along with what the customers and partners and everything are trying to tell me in order to build the right product for them, in order to hit product market fit. At that time, that was just a lot more important than anything else. I did have one interesting, also another story I just don't talk about that is related to fundraising, but more on a grant level. So where we are, the grants are not particularly that easy to obtain. They take a really long time, and in Canada, this was like 2016 or 2018, around between those years when I first started, and the grant amount I think was like $10,000. And again, this has to do with experience. You're gaining a lot of experience doing this. So during those times, a close family member of mine was dying from cancer. So I went home to take care of them. And the grantor from Montreal said that I needed to fly back in order to do the presentation. So I was one of the finalists doing the presentation, and I flew back to do this presentation for $10,000 because I didn't need $4 million. I needed about $10,000 at this time. And I did, and he knew that that family member was sick and I was the caretaker. I did not get the grant. My friends told me who did get the grant, and if I tell you, I feel like it's going to be very aggravating because they were not necessarily startups and they were all of a certain kind of demographic. So I came back, and that's when that family member passed away. The grantor knew that. It's nothing that he could do. He couldn't make that other person live longer, but he also didn't need to tell me that I needed to come back to pitch for a grant that I wasn't going to get. I didn't look or seem like any of the other candidates. And if you saw a list of them, you could see why I wouldn't have gotten it. I don't think that there was any chance that I would have gotten it. And so it was very kind of heartfelt and dramatic. I have a lot of respect for people who are able to get certain kinds of grants and funding, especially the young women that I have mentored in these impact programs and these startup accelerators as an entrepreneur in residence. I think it's such an uphill battle for them, and the levels that they've achieved is something that I really admire, and I love that about them. So that was another kind of experience that has to do with fundraising, but it has to do with the fact that I don't know how I can replace that and again put it in a book or put it in any kind of course or something to teach you about venture capital, because to learn about that you have to learn about what is the makeup of a startup and what that person really goes through and what that team really goes through and how all of that really like plays out, you know? Yeah, and so that's that was something that was an interesting kind of learning experience. After that, I never applied for any other grants before. I was a business plan writer for about 8 years. So I did actually write grants for other people. And that I really loved because it got me to learn about lots of different kinds of business models. It got me to learn about lots of different kinds of founders that I get to work for and work with, and different kinds of industries that I never would have known otherwise. And these kinds of things are really important. All of these things are really important. It ties to how you make decisions as an investor. It also ties to what you would question first as an investor. So one of my investor friends, she taught me this really great thing that has nothing to do with your experience, but it has to do with the way that you think. It was, what can I do in the next 10 minutes or let me try this again. What can I do in the first 10 hours that will save me the next 200 hours of due diligence? So what are the different red flags that I can look into first? That's either going to be a hard no or going to be a pass in order for me to continue my due diligence for the next 200 hours. And so these are the kinds of things that I treasure in terms of my learning and knowledge and being able to always be better and being able to be surrounded by people who just make me better. You know, I think it's so important to have these different experiences under your belt, but also have these people that continue to help you grow. Another one is regarding my journey as a founder. And so, you know, again, these are things that we look at a lot if I was to do due diligence on a startup, because it is based on the fact that I know how difficult that journey was as a founder. So if a founder has technical debt, then that is something that is very serious, because it's the kind of debt you can't even really put money into making it go away. It could be so long, so hard, and it has to do with the fact that you trusted the wrong people. When I was a founder, I wanted to trust everybody, because I just felt like everyone was supposed to be, I don't know, a certain way, a certain kind of support system. And I was introduced to someone who was my interim CTO. And he wanted, after I've already been in business for 2 years, no, about a year and a half, he wanted 50% of the business, no capital investment on his side. He said, if you make $1 billion, I want to make sure that I get enough of it. And he was a PhD student from Concordia. So he was an interim CTO. We already had like a demo. We already had things that were working. And what happened was that first it took him 2 weeks to read an NDA, which was only 2 pages long. And then when he finished reading and signed the NDA, he started, I don't know, what did he start? Oh yeah, he wanted to create a database, which was not necessary. All we needed was for an enhancement of the demo in order to show people how things were going to work and all of that stuff. It was really a very basic version of an MVP, and then doing iterations and iterations upon that. So more like that's how we were at. But he didn't feel comfortable with his own skill set in how to build that out. So he wanted to build things that he was comfortable with, and he wanted to build in a language that he was comfortable with. He didn't say it in any of those words. So that's kind of where there's a big miscommunication. He understood what was expected of him, but he ended up building a whole bunch of other things instead and actually completely crashing everything that we had. We were in technical debt for 1 whole year based on his 14 days of work. And it was so traumatic to the company and to myself. That was my biggest failure. After that, the friend who referred me felt horrible, felt intensely horrible about what this person did to me, and then offered to help. So it was just an aggravating experience. We had so many Bitbucket tickets that has to do with cleaning up his mess. We couldn't possibly even undo it, just the way that he did it. It was impossible to undo what all of that was intertwined with. And he never took responsibility for any of his mistakes, which was whatever that was. And so that, even though that kind of came about, one of the reasons that you know that you may be not getting into the right agreements with investors, even if they're giving you $4 million, is that they didn't catch any of it. They didn't ask me about any of it. They didn't do due diligence on any of that. They just said, okay, well, this is your product. This is what it does now. That's great. Let's do this. But I was really kind of surprised that they weren't able to find any of this, because any seasoned investor would have been able to. There was a lot. And their due diligence wasn't super complete, in my opinion, but I didn't know that at the time as a founder. I only knew what they didn't see. I didn't know all of the things that they didn't see, right? So as an investor now, I am more glad that I didn't take their money, because it felt like if I ever wanted to be an investor, they would have been my first role models. And as somebody who used to be just a lot more impressionable, I don't know if that would have been the best thing. I love the people that I look up to now who are great investors, who are great people, who are great leaders. I love that I always get to learn from them. And I love that when they are in their work mode, that you can see in their face that it's on, And having those kinds of people to look up to is worth a lot more to me than you can imagine. But yeah, so there are still going to be times where you're like, did I give up a lot? I don't know. Should I have said yes? I don't know. Would my life be very different and better? Who knows? Would it be humiliating? Also, who knows? But you'll never really know. What you do know is, where you are now and how you got here. And I think that, there is also a chance that if I was in contracts with the wrong people, then some of the very respectable people that I had in my life now, that I'm so grateful to have in my life now, would have probably stayed away from me, because they probably think I attract, not the best kinds of elements for it to have investors that didn't find my technical debt that the CTO did, and to have people that, ran things in a certain way that was maybe not to code or not to the norm of what is startup and what is founder friendly and what is good for the startup ecosystem overall. But again, this is not something that you'll always ever really find out. But yeah, so I do want to take a moment and thank my collaborator for pushing me to share these stories that I haven't thought about in a long time and I haven't reflected upon in a long time. And I also want to thank my friends, especially the one who asked me, well, I finished this investor course. Do you have another one that you recommend? And really, I don't. Not to say that anybody who wants to be an investor should just go out and found a startup. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that, there are parts of your life and parts of your experiences that you can't ever package and provide to somebody else as a learning tool in any way, even if you wish you could. I guess this is the closest that we are going to get. But yeah, so there are so many pain points in my founder journey, and there are also so many successes and so many highs that is really hard to just say, okay, well, these were the parts that made me successful, or these were the parts that made me this and this and this. So I want to thank you for pushing me to kind of come out of my shell and express these different lessons and learnings and reflections. And I can't wait to share more with you on our next episode.